We're living in a terrifying time for many, many reasons, but one of those reasons is that mass shootings and gun violence is out of control. It's so out of control that this most recent mass shooter purposefully, seemingly, targeted survivors of another mass shooting. That's how deep the sickness runs, and what makes one's stomach churn even more is that the shooter, the terrorist, used a .45 caliber handgun that he had purchased legally when he murdered bar patrons in California. Let me be clear, I couldn't be more in favor of an assault weapons ban. I couldn't be more in favor of universal background checks. I couldn't be more in favor of treating guns the way we do cars, with all the regulations and safety measures we put in place there. But as this shooting shows us, we need to do more than that. That's the tougher pill to swallow. Many of these legislative gun measures, no matter how much they would help, wouldn't completely address the root of the problem. Our generation has curbed a lot of the bad habits of our parents: cigarette smoking, treating the environment like crap, filling our bodies with junk food, and more. But loneliness and social isolation are becoming increasingly prevalent problems. Vivek Murthy, a former Surgeon General of the United States, called loneliness an epidemic, likening its impact on health to obesity or smoking 15 cigarettes per day. And this isolation and loneliness epidemic seems to be affecting young men disproportionately. At the college and university level, males regularly constitute the majority of suicides. And then we look at the rise of incel, involuntarily celibate online communities, men who are desperately lonely and isolated and turning to one another for support. Sometimes these forums can be helpful, but sometimes they can be dangerous, so much so that both the Santa Barbara and Toronto terrorists were radicalized to the point of killing multiple people. Reports have shown that right-wing terrorist groups are recruiting online gamer communities, targeting more vulnerable, socially isolated men. Like all terrorism, we have to look at the systemic causes to fully understand and address the problem. Talking about passing gun control legislation without addressing the deeper issues of mental health and social isolation of young men would not address the root of the issue. It borders on Joe Scarborough's "they hate us because they hate us" thing.
They hate us because they hate us. They hate us because of Obama's drone attacks. No, they don't. They hate us because they hate us.
The stupidity in that clip never fails to amaze me. No one turns to terrorism without systemic, structural problems pushing them to the brink, both with Islamic terrorism and with homegrown right-wing terrorism. It's easy to blame the terrorists, but it does absolutely nothing to solve the problem. Just like we have to grapple with how our foreign policy has created a vacuum that allowed Islamic extremism to take hold, we have to grapple with how our domestic policy and cultural choices have given rise to homegrown terrorism. The California terrorist was a veteran who suffered from PTSD and, reportedly, isolation problems as well. The LA Times found that at least 59% of mass shootings that took place in the United States from 1900 through 2017 were carried out by people who had either been diagnosed with a mental disorder or demonstrated signs of serious mental illness prior to the attack. And what's more, only 1/3 of the people who have committed mass shootings in the US since 1900 had sought or received mental health care prior to their attacks. The US has higher rates of untreated serious mental illness than most other Western countries. Additional research shows that the gap is even larger for males, who have committed 99% of the country's mass public shootings. This is a three-pronged problem. We have way too many guns in our country, and we need gun control immediately. But we also have structural healthcare problems in America, where we don't address mental health and have incredibly high rates of uninsured and underinsured people in this country. Healthcare is a huge part of this problem as well. And lastly, we have to address the isolation of people, particularly young men in America, whether they are isolated because of capitalism, because of internet addiction and online communities that simulate connection, or because of a society that has yet to grapple with how we try to force men into traditionally masculine boxes. We have to address the deeper problems in our society, while also addressing guns.